The latest MCU movie, Thunderbolts, has hit theaters, and now that it's out, has it lived up to the hype? Is the MCU heading in the right direction?
This video contains spoilers.
Before I hop into the review, keep in mind this is all just my opinion. Share what you think about the movie in the comments section down below, and if you're excited for the future of the MCU. And without any further ado, let's hop right into it. So I think overall the team members in here are what really make this movie work.
Oh, that's nice.
Just their dynamic is the biggest strength. Of course, there's a lot of focus on Yelena. She probably has the most screen time. And I think this is easily her best MCU appearance. Where in the Black Widow movie, I thought she was a little bit annoying. And then in the Hawkeye series, it was a little bit better. But here, she actually has an interesting character arc. And of course, early on in this movie, a few of these characters kind of meet in this room to kill each other. One of them being Taskmaster, who actually does end up getting killed. And honestly, no one really liked this version of the character, although the suit was cool. So it's not really a huge deal that she died, but I mean, everyone was able to predict it from the trailers. I actually tried to make a video saying Marvel was tricking us, and Taskmaster was actually going to live. And let's just say that theory was a fail. I find it crazy though how they still had her on so much of the marketing. Of course, John Walker is also in here. He was Captain America temporarily in the Falcon and Winter Soldier series, and that was a fail for him. But in here, he's a US agent, and he's kind of a jerk to everyone. But I still find it very funny how arrogant he is, and he's probably my favorite character in the movie. And then of course you have Ghost, the only member of this team that doesn't just punch and shoot. She actually does have some very unique powers where she can phase through stuff. Although in terms of character development, I feel like they didn't put a ton of spotlight on her. Of course, this movie introduces Bob, aka Sentry, a character from the comics that isn't too popular to the general audience, but one that is certainly very interesting, where basically he was very mentally unstable and he got experimented on for this like super soldier serum 2.0. And so when he's introduced, he doesn't really have a memory, but it is revealed he's a superhuman when he's shot at and survives. And he's kind of exploited through the movie and winds up turning into the Void, where his evil side takes over. And because there's that dual personality and just the fact that the character has memory loss, I think Lewis Pullman did a great performance. I think it might have been the most impressive performance in this movie. And it's definitely very interesting how when characters touch him, they relive certain traumatic memories. And so that's just a nice way they were able to add to the character development for all these different characters in the film. Even in terms of Valentina. Now, she had smaller roles in other MCU projects before this movie, but here you really just get to see that she's kind of the worst. She's very corrupt and reckless, just in terms of how she wants to exploit Bob. But there is the one moment where she has to relive a traumatic memory, and it does make you feel a little bit bad for her. And then of course she has her assistant in here, Mel, who is okay, but a little bit forgettable. And then we also get to see Bucky in here in a newer phase of his life. He becomes a congressman and is definitely wanting to make a difference, but then he winds up kind of taking charge and leading the Thunderbolts because he had already gone through a lot of the stuff they had, and so he's kind of like a mentor. Of course, Red Guardian also plays a huge role in this movie, and he's probably the funniest character in the film. He definitely just stands out because of his charisma. All the other characters know that they're losers, even John Walker deep down does. But Red Guardian, on the other hand, thinks all of them are just super cool.
We are the Thunderbolts!
Can't call ourselves that.
And he's just super excited about forming the team. So as the movie goes along, I think they did a good job of revealing stuff about Bob and his abilities. And something interesting they did for this movie is it only takes place over the course of like a couple days, and there really aren't too many different locations. And so that's just kind of different from how they normally tell these MCU stories. But I think the film does a good job of there being tension throughout as the characters have to kind of protect themselves. And there is also some genuine emotion in this film. And I just think this very much feels like its own movie, to the point where you really don't have to know too much about the MCU to understand what's going on. But it also does a good job of connecting to everything else in the MCU. And it's also setting up stuff for the future. Because after the very unique final battle, which I'll talk about later, the film kind of has an abrupt ending, although not really in a bad way. Like, we're not talking Jurassic Park 3 abrupt. And then we get two post-credit scenes. One is just a fun little joke with Red Guardian trying to get someone to buy cereal, and then the scene after that is actually kind of setting up the future Avengers movies.
Oh, yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for. That's what it's all about.
Where it takes place 14 months after what happened in this movie, and so the characters all have these new outfits, and they're in their headquarters, and everything about this scene just feels very comic booky. I absolutely love it. And then it teases the Fantastic Four coming, which, by the way, I knew it would have something to do with the Fantastic Four because in the credits before this scene, they credited Michael Giacchino for the Fantastic Four score, which literally spoiled it if you were paying attention to the credits. Although it's still a great post-credit scene, and it actually has me excited for the future of the MCU. So as I said, there's tension throughout this movie, and there's just a lot of great stuff they do here with guns, vehicles, and just classic fistfights. They did a lot of stuff practically here, which I always respect. And of course, there is some unique stuff, obviously, like what they do with Ghost's abilities. And then, of course, what they do with the Void in the final battle, with him turning people in the shadows. And it's all done in a very interesting way, where this is a villain that the Thunderbolts obviously can't defeat. At least not by fighting him physically, but I think that's what makes the final battle really unique and interesting because it's like this fantastical sequence where they go into the void, and it's actually just kind of crazy how the movie works because a lot of it at the beginning feels more grounded, but once you get to the end it's very fantastical, and there are just a lot of great action sequences, but I think the standout here is the sequence where the characters are trying to get up this tunnel that was clearly copied from Batman. As I said, there's a lot of practicality in this movie, and obviously they do use some VFX in here for Sentry and that kind of stuff. It's kind of required, but I didn't really find any of the VFX to be bad because they really only used it when it was needed. In terms of the costume design, I found it to be really great. They kind of used desaturated colors, except for Sentry. Obviously, that costume was brighter, and I think that's a perfect example of how to translate a costume from the comics to the movies, where it's pretty comic accurate, but they do add some minor details. And of course, what they do with the Void being all black, I think that just looks great. And I think the costume design contrasts very well with the background of the city, where it's pretty much just kind of gray. It actually kind of reminds me of what they did with Metropolis and Man of Steel. A lot of people actually complained about it in that movie, even though I thought it contrasted very well with Superman's costume and Zod's costume. And it's basically the same situation in this movie.
I think I made myself real clear when I said what I just said.
So throughout the entire movie, they pretty much just use the film's score, except for obviously like the credits. And there is this one part where they're in a limo and a song comes on, although that's just like 5 seconds. And I did find that to be a little surprising. I thought they were going to have more songs in here, kind of like what they had in the trailers. But honestly, I don't really have a problem with them relying on the score. And the score they used for this movie was pretty good. It's not really like one of the best when it comes to comic book movies, but it is really good in and of itself. Most of the comedy just comes from the banter between the characters and just their personalities, how they're all wildly different from one another. There are some lazy jokes in here, but it doesn't really matter because there is effort put into other jokes. If the whole movie was just lazy jokes, then I would have a problem with it. But since most of the stuff they go for in here is genuinely funny, I'm not really going to care about the jokes that aren't as good. So overall, this is easily one of the best MCU projects in recent years. It's definitely one of the darker MCU films since it covers stuff like depression. As a matter of fact, it might be one of the best MCU projects ever. I think it's easily in my top 10 MCU films, maybe even top 5, although I don't want to go that far yet because there is some recency bias. So overall, on the quality scale of 0 to 100, I'll give it a 93%, and I would definitely recommend it. If you've seen it, let me know in the comment section down below what you think about it. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.